Hello, hello. Welcome to On the Marbles. I'm your host, Steve Jones, coming to you from afar. And like your panel, I'm about to introduce, I'm not in Azerbaijan for the Baku Grand Prix this weekend. I'm not going to throw them under the bus by mentioning their name because God knows what kind of pressure these PCR companies are under. But my test to fly certificate didn't come through in time for my flight to Baku, hence sitting at the gate for 2 hours like a prize plum before being sent away with my tail between my legs. Anyway, long story short, I'm hosting this podcast over Zoom, which, as we all know, is incredible technology, but still technology beholden to my shit internet connection and frequent vocal delay. So please keep that in mind as we blast some little rubber balls into your ears for however long this is about to take. All right. Joining us off the racing line, we've got a very international panel for you here today. Mark Webber is with us, who hails from Australia. G'day, sport.
G'day, mate. How are you, mate? Yeah, all good?
Tops, mate, tops. Billy Monger cuts a fine figure before me. He's an Englishman. How do you do?
Very well, sir.
Nice. And representing a country that gave us the television and a minimum price on alcohol, proud Scot, Lee McKenzie. Yeah, hey!
All right, doll.
How you doing? But it's wonderful to have you back on the marbles with us. Bloody fantastic. I want to get into it. I want to tear the podcast world a new a-hole. But first, I got a little bone to pick with Mark. I got some feedback, Mark, on Conti Marlo. You remember my erotic poem about Monaco that I performed in the last podcast?
Mate, beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah,
You've
well,
trademarked that. You've traded, mate. Trademarked
No,
it.
you're saying that. No, you're saying that, Mark, but I'm just a little bit confused because I asked you right after I performed it, do you think our listeners will like it? And you said, yes, they will. That's what you said, Mark. Yes, they will. Would you like to hear some of the feedback?
Righto, roll it, mate. Roll it. Are they from Maidenhead?
Someone said this about my poem. I hope you end up chained to a radiator in a serial killer's basement. Does that sound like positive feedback to you, Mark?
You wouldn't put it on the cover if you were writing a book of poems. I don't think that would be the sort of the thing that would encourage people to read more.
No, because it's not constructive. You know, and I can't grow as an artist with feedback like that. Do you want to hear what somebody else said?
Yeah.
Someone said, I hope you play golf, so there's a chance a golf ball traveling 150 miles per hour hits you in the vocal cords.
Yeah, well, that's possible. Actually, let's do that, mate. Before the year's out, we will go for a round of golf, and we'll find that individual. And maybe you can tee off with a driver, and you can stand in front of him and see if you can hit you in the vocal cords, mate. I mean, are these?
I don't want that to happen to me, Mark.
I know, mate.
And this abuse has to stop. It has to stop.
In this sensitive world we live in, mate. I find. I mean, these people they really are taking the piss now, mate. I mean, you've got feelings, mate. You got feelings.
Exactly.
I mean,
I'm an artist.
Yeah. How did?
I'm an artist.
I
want to evoke emotions, but all I seem to evoke is vitriol. Listen to this. Your poem inspired me, and I thought, wow, that's some positive feedback. Your poem inspired me to build a time machine, travel back in time, and murder my parents, so I will never be born and won't have to listen to the festering pile of monkey scat that was Conti Marlo. What?
Well,
that's quite well written, actually, as criticism goes. You know, they've got a good range.
It's easy
of
to say that
vocabulary.
when it's not leveled at you, Lee.
It's about to be.
Yeah. I think he is certainly disappointed, mate. He's certainly disappointed. That's these poor folks. That's right.
Do you want to hear one more, short and sweet?
Please.
Someone said, "I hope you shit the bed every night for the rest of your life." What's wrong with people? Well, listen.
That's rough, mate.
It is rough, but what doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
Yeah.
So as soon
Not everyone
as the
makes it
right
into
track,
that second group.
as soon as the right track tickles my fancy, I will get right back up on that horse, listeners. If you think you've heard the last deeply sensual prose about how I would like to get naked, cover myself in Castrol GTX, and rub my genitals over 5K of tarmac, think again. You think on that.
Can I nervously
right.
interject here, Steve? Because, and it is now very nervously, because I've been sitting at home watching C4F1. And I decided, you know when like Eminem releases a really good track and then a few weeks later someone like Rihanna tries to sort of copy it and it's a little bit disappointing? Well, I have written a sort of ode to C4F1 that if you will indulge me, I could maybe share with you. And whilst yours is the more adult/filth end of the spectrum, mine is a little bit more sort of family-friendly CBBC. And I will take on the role of getting abused after this. Is that okay?
Oh, please, indulge to your heart's delight.
Okay,
I'm all ears.
Let me just get my telephone pet.
Wow.
Let me just get my
It's a
telephone
little bit of an
pest voice
advantage,
on.
Lee, having that voice, by the way. that silky smooth vocals.
Telephone
it's
pest
a little bit
voice
of an
is
advantage.
on. I love On the Marbles, and I like to listen in bed. The dulcet tones coming out my phone, I delight in what the boys said. Steve Jones is a lyrical gangster. Mark Webber sums up Aussie grit. And what about EJ? I think he's like 90, but for an oldie, he's looking quite fit. And apparently, it's not all about Lewis. There's a new kid in town, and he's ruthless. Not Max, goodness sake. I'm talking about Jake's, new man on the mic, new comms, who dis? One more. Billy's fundraising, a sight to be seen. DC's hair's the same shade as his jeans. But it's great to be here. It's my first of the year, and what an incredible team.
Oh. Absolutely.
Bravo.
Yeah.
That was absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's all downhill from here, but we'll try all the same. Let's see what we can cobble together in the aftermath of Lee's brilliance. All right, time to have at it. Let's get a quick word from our sponsors. Today's show is brought to you by Formula One CEO and car parts brainiac, Ross Brawn.
Hello, my name's Ross Brawn, and you might know me from my various roles within the sphere of Formula One racing. But today, I would like to talk to you about my debut erotic novel, Hard Love. Hard Love is the story of one woman's sexual odyssey set to the backdrop of London's Regency period in the 1800s, a time of high society, high fashion, and fast living. I shall now read a short extract from Hard Love by Ross Brawn. Hugo had returned from the Napoleonic Wars a changed man. He had left with a light disposition, only to return with a dark intensity. It was with this intensity that he now turned to Cordelia. "You've never met a man such as me before, have you?" he asked, his buttocks naked, taut, and gleaming in the midday sun. "I cannot lie, for I have not," said Cordelia, drawn to the wicked curves of his pink lips. She was a ship lost amongst the rocks. There was no lighthouse to guide her. "Kiss me," he pleaded, feeling the engorgement in his fairground. "I must not, for there is danger there," she whimpered, now feeling the stirrings in her own pleasure garden. "It is not my intention to place the lady in peril," said Hugo, his hot breath on her face, the smell of secret liaisons. She could not resist him. She ran a sweaty hand along the nodules of his quivering spine, before finally reaching her goal, his generous man-mounds. With trembling fingers, she kneaded the buttock meat of his haunches. That was a short extract from my debut erotic novel, Hard Love, by Ross Brawn. I certainly hope you enjoy reading it as much as I enjoyed writing it. Hard Love by Ross Brawn is now available in Ann Summers nationwide.
What just happened?
Bravo. Come on. That was wonderful.
I'm thinking I might just nip out, buy a gift, maybe chocolates, and give them to Ross Brawn and his legal team and say, On the Marbles, never heard of it.
I never thought I'd hear Ross Brawn and Ann Summers in the same sentence, mate, but fair play, son.
Oh, yeah.
I always suspected there was a deeply sensual man beneath that calm, measured exterior. I really did. And I can't wait to get the audiobook. But bravo, Ross. Good for you, man, branching out there.
Yeah.
All right. On the Marbles, it's a go, go, go! The first of a delightful selection of questions from our listeners is from Titch Baker. I say delightful, maybe not if you're Danny Rick. Titch asks, after another hideous Grand Prix in Monaco, is the Daniel Ricciardo machine now in absolute crisis mode? I mean, yep, Lando took third and Daniel came 12th. I mean, what the hell is going on with everyone's second favourite Aussie, Mark?
Yeah, well, it looks certainly very challenging for him at the moment, doesn't it? I think the Monaco Grand Prix, like if he could pick a track to say that he wanted to get on top of his average start to the year, I think it would be Monaco, and it's turned out to be the complete 180. So he had no confidence in the car there, which for a driver, I don't care who you are, if you can't perform at venues that you have a bit of a love affair with, which he does with Monaco, that goes quite deep. And then obviously he went off on the medium tyre. Strategy wasn't great because of his qualifying, and then Lando lapped him halfway through, or 3/4 of the way through the race, which is absolutely brutal for a driver. Big weekend for him. Big weekend for him this weekend. I think the next few months in terms of him getting on top of this car, because it can, as a driver, you want to start to get at one with the vehicle, and he's not. He is behind the car. The car is driving him at the moment. That is a bad recipe for any top flight driver. We know he's phenomenal, but this sport can humble drivers very, very quickly, and we're all concerned. He is our second favourite Aussie. We know that, mate. I mean, after Bob Hawke. Who else we got, mate? Yeah.
Harold Bishop.
Yeah, Harold Bishop, he got it done, didn't he? So I think that Dame Edna.
We've dropped him to fourth.
Yeah, fourth.
Yeah.
Okay, where am I?
No, you're number one. That's what I was insinuating.
I know, mate. I just wanted to hear it again. I think that, big few months. And no, mate, look, I'm not a gambling man, but I would have lost a hatful on what's going on right now.
Well, I think we all would have. Lee, what's your opinion? Has the honey badger become just a run-of-the-mill badger of late?
The honey's gone. No, I don't think the honey's gone. I do wonder, though, there will come a time where maybe he will sit down and start to doubt some of the decisions that he's made. He spent a long time trying to work out whether or not he wanted to leave Red Bull. He made that choice. He obviously, the fact that he bounced on quite as quickly as he did would insinuate that the choice that he made at Renault wasn't the right one for him. And then he got given this McLaren opportunity. He would have thought, I'm pretty sure, that he would have gone into McLaren and just bossed things. And, when, as Mark says, when that doubt sets in, you just can't let it take over, can he? He's got to start putting some performances together. And I don't know when that's going to happen. Will it come here? If you've not had the confidence from Monaco, or things haven't gone right in Monaco and this is another street circuit, does it sort of linger on? That's the thing that we'll find out pretty soon.
Yeah, he's a very positive person, is Danny, and I think he's going to need all of that positivity moving forward. Sergeant Bushell has been on. I want to get a Billy view on this one. Toto totally threw Bottas under the bus when he said Valtteri didn't position the car properly for that nightmare pit stop in Monte Carlo. What does this mean? Asks Sergeant Bushell. Curtains for Bottas? What do you think, Billy? It's not looking good over there. Acrimonious, you could say.
It's not typical like Mercedes style how things being handled over there recently, isn't it? You normally think Mercedes think like slick as anything, like they can just handle whatever situation. They're all about the team. It seems at the minute there's a lot of pointing fingers going on over that side of the paddock, and Toto saying and the team saying Valtteri was short. Valtteri saying, well, hold up a minute, wasn't short at all. Like, I don't know why I'm getting the finger pointed at me, but when Mercedes get it wrong, it goes proper Pete Tong, doesn't it? It's that's just their style.
Yeah. I think I'm right in saying in the 5 years Valtteri's been at Mercedes, I've leveled many questions at Toto about Valtteri's performance on a given day, and he has never said anything negative about him. He immediately, he's got his back every single time. So something has absolutely changed in that setup. Lee, Mark, I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, I'm with Billy, mate. I think, starting to wash a little bit of their clothes in public, which is a little bit unusual. So there's definitely some more heat, I think, in the sort of dynamic of understanding how these frustrations are borne out on the track. And a lot of them are dealt with behind closed doors. But that one, obviously, when they're saying that, and this is a key, Valtteri had one job at that pit stop, obviously put the car on the marks. He believed he did that well. He'd done it thousands of times, and he's saying it was within a couple of centimetres, which is, yes, within the noise. If you're short, meaning for the people on the podcast, the mechanics have got to go back. It's against their natural motion, which isn't that straightforward, but they can do it. And in the end, he did have a dodgy pit stop, and then Merck have alluded to the fact that he might have been short in the stop.
This is new territory, I think, for Mercedes. I think, Billy alluded to that. The fact that they are sort of pointing the finger and a bit of a blame game. I'm always a little suspicious when, you hear Toto and people saying, what we want is absolute competition and we want to be, challenged. Well, I wonder how they're feeling now that Red Bull are leading both championships. Because when Ferrari have threatened, you never necessarily in recent years felt that was going to go to the end. So it's quite you don't mind if someone threatens for one weekend, but this is a proper challenge, it feels like.
Yep, and interesting, Steve, first time, isn't it, that we've heard Toto directly talking to Valtteri in races this year, pretty much. I mean, there might have been, I think, a little bit last year, but I mean, he is... he's not leaving any change on the table. If he's got some tough decisions to make at some point this year down the line in terms of employment, he's leaving no change on the table in terms of what he believed he could do to make it, to motivate Valtteri to give him the most clear, transparent feedback, whether it's in the trenches, whether it's out of the trenches. Toto's giving him everything that he needs.
And Billy, I imagine that George Russell is watching this drama unfold keenly. Very keenly.
Yeah, I reckon so. I reckon he's laughing his way to the paddock most days, I think. I saw something about George, actually, saying that he wants to know his F1 future by the summer break, which is a bit of a weird move in some ways for George, because that's something that you wouldn't... He's only got one option, really.
It's ballsy.
He's almost capitalising on Bottas being sort of down and out and everyone kind of putting the pressure on him, and he's sort of saying, all right, well, I'll use now as the chance to get that Merc F1 seat that I've been after for a few years. So it's a bold move for him, but I mean, he's backing it up with good performances, so you can't knock him for doing it.
Like, hasn't the summer already been and gone in the UK?
I think that was last week.
Yeah, it was about last year, I think.
But and you'll know this, Mark, from when you're doing these driver interviews, there is nothing more soul destroying for, me asking questions or whoever it may be, and the driver there. Sometimes I was asking Felipe Massa when he was at Ferrari by Monaco whether his seat was in jeopardy, and you hated the words coming out your mouth, and he was just getting really, really annoyed with you. But the more that the people talk about this, the more that this drags on, that Mercedes sort of let it drag on without being a clear decision, it's not good for Valtteri. You talk about mental health and all the rest of it. The pressure, every Thursday he has to sit there with the same questions, every Friday, every Saturday, Sunday. It just mounts up, and it takes a really strong person to get better under that pressure and not to let it eat away.
Yeah, you're right, and it doesn't go away, does it? As you said, it just builds and builds and builds. Once the hounds are out, they don't forget. They keep pummeling the drivers with the same questions over and over again.
That's right, mate. I mean, some people miss their flight to this friggin' race. I mean, we're not going to let you forget that, mate. I mean, we are not.
I didn't miss the flight. I was denied entry.
How many of our listeners have been to an airport and driven with their bag and everything, passport, paperwork, and driven away from the airport?
Horrible feeling.
Yeah, great
horrible
feeling. Yeah.
Horrible feeling. Anyway, I got a great question here, and it's more of a fundamentals of Formula One question, specifically Monaco. Have a listen to this. Al from the Cayman Islands wants to voice his disappointment. After the 2-year wait, I was so excited to see Monaco back on my screen. And then around lap 2, immediately gutted when I remembered that it's a truly awful race. How can we fix it? And I started thinking about this, and I think it was Einstein who said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. So, Mark, are we nuts going back to Monaco year after year, continually expecting a great race and not getting it?
Yeah, it's a little bit of an oxymoron, that event now, mate, isn't it? In terms of the viewing figures, the people, it's a drug. Everyone wants to watch the Monaco Grand Prix, go to the Monaco Grand Prix. It's an extraordinary event. It's one of the big 3 global Indy 500, Le Mans, and Monaco Grand Prix. They are right up there, and it's the one that we all want to win. Right now, what's happening is the cars... Well, first of all, the track's never been smoother. So, and what that does is makes the error factor lower. So the barriers are still there, yes, but, and I'm not going back in my day, but the track has gone on a journey, and that has made it more flattering in terms of it's smoother. The cars, the engineers are getting more and more advanced in terms of how to tackle a circuit like that. And the biggest thing is the cars are, of course, they're massively quick, the quickest they've ever been, and they're huge. They're big cars now, so they've never been bigger in terms of their scale. So to try and outbrake someone, trying to get a move done, is really, really, really hard. So I'm with our friend there from the Cayman Islands. It's a race that we still all want to win. It's really, as we said on the top of our opener for Channel 4, it's really more man versus track than driver versus driver. It is really you. I felt when I had success there, I have to beat the track. I never really thought too much about the opposition. If I get on top of the track, I'm going to win. So it's a bizarre psychological approach for that track and that venue and that weekend. We need it on the calendar. I think that was a really horrendous race. If we had Leclerc on pole, and it would have been a cracker of a Grand Prix between him and Max. Unfortunately, we didn't, and Lewis didn't fire, and it was a bit of a damp squid, but we should go back there in the future with some tweaks, maybe on car size.
And just to interject on that, if you actually look at support races and other series as well, not just on that F1 calendar. You look at the historic Monaco Grand Prix, you get some cracking racing there. And so it's not necessarily, the track suddenly isn't delivering. It's, as Mark says, the size of the car and things, because you do get some great motor racing round that circuit, but with different cars.
Is that realistic, though? I mean, could we shrink the cars for Monaco? Is that realistic?
Not for like one-off, mate, but a regulation in its entirety, yes. Going forward, I think they're going to... We've got Ross Brawn's cars. I mean, obviously, Ross, it might be in his book that he's written, but he might touch on that in one of the chapters about shrinking cars. But the opportunity to have a different regulation, because the cars are just too big now. They're wide, they're long. So, for Lewis to outbrake Max or vice versa, I mean, the guys are on the limit on their own to then put another big percentage factor for you to get down the inside on the dirty line, a compromised radius into the corner. So to pull a move off like that is so hard with the cars this size. So that's probably the biggest challenge at a venue like Monaco. The track hasn't got any bigger, the cars have, and when the cars have got bigger, the racing has suffered.
Okay, Crimson Carlos has a request. I'd like to give the On the Marbles team an opportunity to wax lyrical about Sebastian Vettel's hugely successful Monaco campaign. I feel it's a long overdue. Mark, Billy, Lee, what do you say? Seb, a four-time world champion, coming fifth in an Aston Martin at Monaco, worthy of some OTM love. What do you think?
Yeah, amazing. It was awesome. What else happened?
I mean, that was, he was voted driver of the day.
Yep.
Which, I don't know, it just shows you really how tough the past couple of years have been, because that is not what he's aiming for.
No.
I think if Lewis came
right
fifth, he would not be driver of the day.
Yeah, it's a good point. But Mark, when we interviewed him after the race, did you think that sparkle was back in his eyes when we spoke to him, or am I just projecting?
Yeah, I don't think it's lit up just yet mentally for him. Interestingly, because on the marbles, we're so good at getting scoops. And before I come into this salubrious studio here today, I spoke to some of the people from Aston, and they said it was actually, to be fair, very, very, very handy performance from him. So they were stoked with how he drove, put the weekend together, the experience he has, which we know, is phenomenal. So they are seeing true value in him being there now. So let's just hope he can compound those type of results at places like this. This is a little bit of big wave surfing here, Steve. These street circuits are tough. They penalise you with your enthusiasm can really get you. You can get it clipped around the head pretty quickly if you misjudge things, as we saw with Leclerc when he first come to Azerbaijan. So, these places, you need a wise old dog in the cockpit, and they've got that with him, and let's see if he can continue to get those good results. I was taking the Michael at the top there where I started didn't care. I mean, it was good to see him do well. And, let's see. If, the next, again, I think for him and Daniel, it's phenomenal, isn't it? The next 6 months, is it a guarantee that he will be here next year? He's probably got a contract, but he can still... Let's see, Sebastian, there might be a white flag. I don't know. I mean, that's going to be the freaking quote. I'm being positive, but he's got such a ridiculous trophy cabinet that he still could do something. You just never know. So before any of their press team bang on about on the marble, Slayton said, we think he's phenomenal. I think he's got another 8 championships in him, but he might not race next year.
But he's comfortable at Aston Martin. Having spoken to him a few times, he's pretty comfortable. He's enjoying it there. They're loving having him there as well. So, if that continues, a few decent results, Chance of a podium?
I don't know. Yeah, it's possible. What do you think, Steve?
No chance. Moving on. Luckily, I know nothing, Seb, so it's fine. Next question, and it's a wildcard question. We've started getting in questions that have nothing to do with F1, and I feel it's a really nice way that our wonderful listenership lets us know that they appreciate that we are complex people with hopes and dreams and opinions outside of F1. So here's Noah Humes, who asks, who is your favorite superhero, gang?
Iron Man,
Tell me why.
because I've got iron in me.
That makes sense. Nice. And he's awesome, isn't he? Fair play. So yeah, keep those wildcard questions coming in. We do enjoy them so. Next up, Maud the Impaler has been on. Anybody else surprised that Ocon has started stitching up Fernando Alonso at every Grand Prix? Ocon was 9th in Monaco, Alonso 13th. You guys surprised by that?
Well, I think that this is absolutely Ocon's moment. He has to. He's been around a while. People forget he's done quite a few Grand Prix now, several seasons in F1. He was at Racing Point for a while, and then, he had Daniel last year, which was tough for him. A lot of experience. Don't forget, Daniel's had exposure to Max and exposure to Sebastian, so that's a handy colleague to have in your stable next year. So he would have learnt a lot from that Ocon. So he's never been better. Experience, speed, enthusiasm, motivation, make or break year for him this year. And, he's turning it on Fernando in terms of quality pace and race strategy and all the rest of it. Fernando is not at one with this car. It's tricky again. It's not like he's not as he's older than Daniel, but there's guys that still there's a lot of different categories in Formula One's one category, but you have to learn lots of different categories, the subtleties of understanding to get the most out of the machinery. And Fernando is not getting the most out of that car at the moment, so not really surprised with.
You say you're not surprised, but Fernando has had 5 races to get his ducks in a row. Are you surprised that he hasn't got there as yet?
No, because mate, it's an incredibly competitive field, and these guys are on the case. And if you've just that 1% off or less, 0.5% off, you can look a little bit exposed, and that's what he's going through now. I think that he knows that he's generally on top of the car at the back of the weekend. And sometimes I say, it's like testing. We used to go on all these tests. Test drivers used to come. They used to be half quick. The great guys, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, they are on it on Friday. Bang, straight away. As was Fernando Alonso at his peak. Friday, he needed no warm-up. He was into it. Any sport in the world, mate, that's what it's about. Turning up, consistency, delivering straight away. Fernando's fast on Monday after the weekend. Because he needs that long to get in the groove, and that's just he knows that he needs time to get his eye in. So and that will be frustrating for him because he knows what's required. He knows that he's not quite in sync with that car.
But Fernando also, don't forget, didn't want to inherit a car. Where Fernando is very strong, and you'll know this, is when he has been embedded within a team and created and developed a car kind of for himself and pushed his teammate aside. And, those rule changes being delayed was not helpful to him. So he is there, he is at Alpine, and the whole reason he has been brought back is for when these rule changes come into play, with the experience that he's had over his, 43 years in Formula One, that he is there at the forefront, understanding the car, making a car. And you will agree with this, that Fernando is quite a selfish, human being in terms of being a driver, and, that's what has made him a double world champion, and he will make a car that suits him.
Yep, he will, as best of his ability, but at the moment it's slipping away from him. So we will see. I was just happy that Lee said he's had 43 years in Formula One. I mean, that's a long slog for Fernando, mate.
I've interviewed him for 42 of them.
42 of them, yeah. Holy crackers.
Well, Fernando's got 18 more races to get his mojo back, so the best of luck to him. We have a question in for Lee from Dave. Dave makes the observation that, Lee, you are a multi-hyphenate. You're all over sport in various capacities. Which is your favorite to cover? Tennis, rugby, Formula One?
Well, this is an interesting one because I don't necessarily love every single Formula One race. in that I don't love every tennis competition, but I do love Wimbledon, and there are sort of standout F1 races. So I think if I could make a perfect calendar, you would want to maybe start off in the Six Nations, turn up to some nice F1s, and then have a bit of Wimbledon in between, and then pop back to a couple of... I probably would miss the Russian Grand Prix.
But that's what you do anyway, Lee, isn't it?
Well, that's kind of what I do.
That's exactly what you do anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, Mark. That is a good point. But I have loved coming back here, because the one thing is, and I started off doing a lot of the support races in Formula One, is the number of people you know, which I don't necessarily have in other sports. So I can walk in, speak to mechanics, engineers, physios, and that gives you a little bit of confidence when you're trying to do your job. And that's how you learn things as well. So it's lovely being back. Yes.
I'm gonna rephrase that question, Lee, because I feel you're being a little bit slippery there. Sounds like you want your cake and you want to eat it.
Yes.
So let me try that again for Dave. He wants answers.
Sorry.
I'm backing the listeners here. Out of the three, Formula One, tennis, rugby, you have to lose 2 and commit to 1. What's it gonna be?
Formula One, Steve.
Yes.
And Dave.
What would you say if you were doing a tennis podcast right now?
Tennis, Steve. Tennis, Dave.
She's canny. She's very canny. So there you go, Dave. Answered. This one's for Mark from Josh Bowskill. What was the most embarrassing moment of your F1 career, Mark? You want to peek inside that box?
Far out, mate. I mean,
it's nice, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm not embarrassed about crashing because I'm pushing the boundaries and the limits and those sort of things. But in terms of, like, for example, one day going on a mountain bike ride with a couple of mechanics, and we were told by a local mountain bike shop in Montreal where we could ride these bikes, and we went up behind the town there in Montreal, which is a good little city, and I was back then obviously reasonably in shape and not carrying the extra 8 kilos I am now, like Pavarotti, trying to ride a motorbike, and the seat disappearing around my ass. But so I went for a ride with these guys, and we took one of the locals with us because it was cool. And then we're descending. I said, I want to find some really gnarly descents, hairpins and switchbacks, and good, all good. So we come through this section flat out, full noise. I was second wheel. And then there was about 6 of us, and we popped out of this trail onto an open field. We pretty much rode through a middle of a funeral service. There was a cemetery going on, and they were literally, you could see them. There was the moment when they were putting the coffin in the hole. It was so embarrassing. Yeah, like you couldn't even. You just wanted to, mate. Back to your question, when the person wanted to go back in time, you couldn't disappear, mate. You just couldn't brake, couldn't go. We were having the time of our lives, and they were having a funeral for a loved one. So that was pretty embarrassing, awesome, to say the least. Shocking intel, and I felt horrendous.
That's a weird one to want the ground to swallow you up in that situation as well.
Slight irony.
But excellent. Yeah, mate, there's a few. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's how you sort of judge embarrassing. We had a great flight back, didn't we, from Brazil?
Oh, yeah. So one I think was it 09?
Yeah, so Jensen had won the championship.
That's right. Yeah, mate, so 09. So we haven't spoken about DC much here, but we'll give him a little bit of a name check because he's easily forgotten. But I had a good victory, fluked a win in Brazil, and we had a few drinks back at the hotel before the flight normally leaves around 10:30 into Lagos back to Heathrow. It's a BA flight. And DC, how we got him to the airport with the amount of people we had in the car is still to this day a miracle. But we were the driver was, we were being driven by a chauffeur. We were, all the rest of us were pretty confident at this point. DC was, back to our Superman. He was lying between, so his head was on the dashboard and his feet were in the back of the car. And so we're going to the airport and we turn up there. And then we're on the flight, and I remember we were taxiing out, and they brought a bit of champagne round, and Christian said, let's fire some, some of the good stuff into Christian. And Christian's like, no, it's all right, we're fine. And so we took off, and And then we finally got Christian to have a few drinks. And, mate, fast forward 6 hours, mate, we are now absolutely paralytic in first class. And we got kicked out of first class. They actually said there was one passenger that wasn't linked to the Formula One in the first class cabin. And he was going bonkers.
Yeah.
He was absolutely disgusted with us. And we're trying to jump into other people's, trying to sleep with on their laps and stuff. And we got sent back into business class. So we're down there, and then we cause havoc through the business class. And I got some glasses, old step-toe glass. There was a guy asleep. Again, a neutral, wasn't part of the F1 community. I took his glasses off.
He'd taken his glasses off to sleep. This old man had taken his glasses. I was only awake because I heard some sort of mutterings, and I took off my little visor, and I saw 4 hands coming in, and it was DC and Mark going, "Is it her? We'll wake her. We'll find out." And I then was like, alarm bells ringing. Never slept again.
Yeah, it's now 3. Yeah, it was 3 a.m.
So
mate. So we woke up every passion of business.
Off this old man who was probably at this point so scared he was pretending to be asleep, and Mark is wearing the glasses.
Yeah, had those on.
And then you served breakfast.
Served brekkie. I think most of the hostess left, mate. We were actually now in control of first and business class.
They sat the drinks cart out and left.
They gave up on us. So, yeah. And then I remember Anne picking me up at the airport saying, "Do you have a good flight?" And she's like, "Yeah." Well, and she didn't even have to nearly finish the word flight. And she's like, "Yeah, get in the car." So that wasn't embarrassing. That was just great.
No.
But I think we did some embarrassing stuff.
It wasn't embarrassing to us because we were involved, but to everybody else who would hate us.
Yes.
Well, I say that.
Thank you for sharing. Absolutely incorrigible, every single one of you. Nagadoshi says, Charles Leclerc appears to be cursed at his home Grand Prix. He's never finished there in his F1 career. He finished. He didn't bloody start 2 weeks back. Anyway, sorry. Naga continues. What is it that affects him there? The pressure of the occasion, the fact it's his home Grand Prix, or is he just jinxed? Beamer, what are your thoughts?
I wouldn't say he's jinxed or it's anything to... Maybe it is a bit of homegrown pressure, sort of obviously being from Monaco himself. But he's fast and he's pushing the boundaries, and Monaco's a circuit that bites back. So, I mean, you can't sit here and say that he's crashing at a circuit in a manner which you haven't seen anyone else do before. Like, okay, he was on for pole and obviously didn't start the race last time out, but I've seen so many people crash at that same spot in the circuit, like regardless of it being their home race or not. So I think Monaco's just one of those tracks where it either goes your way or it doesn't, and I think probably he hasn't quite, by the looks of his previous results, kind of managed to, like Mark said, you can get a bit excited, a bit eager around there, and it can bite back. And I think maybe there's a little bit of that going on. But he's definitely fast around there. He just needs to put a whole weekend together.
Is it a street circuit thing, though? Because he got bitten here, didn't he? He was fastest in all the practice sessions and then stacked it in quali a couple of years ago.
I am stupid moment.
Yeah. Well, mate, for our On the Marblers for the next podcast, we should... it'll be a good... It's actually a cracking question because Charles is not the only driver. Rubens Barrichello had a horrendous record in Brazil. Unreal. Jenson Button, British Grand Prix. Mark Webber, Australian Grand Prix. So it was actually Jenson and I said, mate, if we could just share, do you know how much I wanted to win the Australian Grand Prix? And I couldn't go slow at Silverstone, mate. I could not go slow around there. Jenson couldn't go slow around Albert Park. I actually didn't mind Melbourne, but gone for a cracking result in the Williams 1 year. Gearbox went. There was a lot. So I don't know. It's not like, do you want it too much? Is the extra build up the pressure? I think there is something in that. Leclerc's media. I mean, it's a very topical thing right now in terms of sports people and media and handling the week going into the race and all the rest of it. Or any sporting event for that matter. But that would be a good one to do some homework on and work out the stats around. Apart from Lewis, because obviously he's won everywhere. But anyone else that's had good careers but sticky home form would be interesting.
Well, we discussed this in Monaco, Mark, and it is slightly different for Charles. I don't know if you remember the conversation, Mark, but Charles is the only driver with a home Grand Prix where his neighbours in his hometown are literally hanging over their balconies watching him. I mean, that has to be an absolute mind F.
Yeah. No, I think, it'd be awesome feeling. I mean, the adrenaline and the sort of intensity and the love for wanting to do something unique and special in front of the people is hard to ignore. But having said that, I mean, you go back, I mean, it's before you were born, Steve, but, Nigel Mansell used to win races at the British Grand Prix in early 90s. And same thing, mate. You got 100,000 there, and 98% of them have got a Union Jack. That is, there's a truckload of energy there as well. So,
remember we saw Brendan Hartley watching the race from his balcony in
yeah,
Monaco
we did.
2 weeks back.
That's right.
It was a bit surreal, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I said that's where I was going to Steve. I said that's where Brendan's apartment is. Shit, there he is. That's him with the black T-shirt. Yeah. So he was watching it. That was good.
Super cool. Of course, it was a home race of sorts for Hamilton, and Bernie Todd reckons he had a shocker. He says Lewis finished the Monaco Grand Prix in 7th after a supremely lackluster and whiny race. Do you think finally, after an easy ride since Rosberg's departure at the end of 2016, the champ is on the back foot? Who wants to have a go at that?
Was that Bernie?
Bernie Todd.
Oh, Bernie Todd, not Jean Todt, but
And that's
Bernie,
a hybrid, isn't it?
Yeah, Jean Eccleston. No, he's not. A beaten Lewis Hamilton is frightening. So look, this weekend, okay, he might not win here, but I mean, he has this paranoid perfection in his head. Hamilton operates like that for me. That's why he is so successful. He's so good because he's reset on the motivational levels of him off the back of a defeat. And he got smoked in Monaco. He got smoked there by his teammate before the pit stop, and his whole weekend he couldn't get on top of the car. Lewis hates that feeling. He is a winner. And no, he's not off the back of, okay, Rosberg did give him a hard time and did a brilliant job to get the championship. But he's had some rivals turn up. I use the analogy, he's had lots of different people turn up in the boxing ring several rounds. He's saying, next round is this guy, next round is that guy, next round is this guy. And Lewis has always seen them off. So I still think he's a favourite for the championship. I'd love to see Max get one. I'd like to see Lewis break the records. Honestly, I've got splinters in my ass there. I know that on the fence. But I would like to see both of them do something because it would be so unique for whoever gets the job done.
Yeah. What do you think, Beamer? Is a Hamilton on the back foot? You almost like cornering a dangerous animal. You don't want to be in front of a guy who's ready to attack.
Yeah, when it comes to fight or flight, he's always a fighter, Lewis. It's always that. You always get that response out of him. So I think, like Mark said, to be honest, I'd expect this weekend, okay, maybe, like Mark said, he's not going to win the race, but I'd expect some serious fighting talk and some commitment from Lewis. And you don't often see Lewis have like a weekend where he can't get on top of things. Like, he might make a little mistake in practice and sort of then by the time it's qualifying you've completely forgotten about anything that didn't go well for him in practice because he's on pole again for the however many times he's been on pole. It's been like a ridiculous amount. So yeah, he's a person who can just do the job no matter the pressure or circumstance. I think he will be back right up the sharp end this weekend for sure.
Yeah, awesome in the car, Lewis Hamilton, and fascinating outside of the car as well, as Nick Sesh is about to prove. He wants to pick our brains. What do you guys think about Lewis's comments about F1 being a billionaire boys club? Is it? Does it matter if it is? And why do you think Lewis brought it up all of a sudden? Lee?
I don't think it's ever changed. I mean, if you can go back 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and people have paid to drive in Formula One. It just has moved from millionaires to billionaires, probably. That's the only difference. So is it right? Probably not. I mean, everyone you speak to outside Formula One, it's like it's a sort of dirty secret that we all know this happens and people buy their way in. But it's always happened. And then you speak to people who say they're Formula One fans and it blows their mind. I don't think people actually appreciate that. They think there's 20 guys on the grid who are millionaires from racing cars as opposed to people who have turned up, with a bag of cash and paid their way in. But it's happening less often, but you still need to have money to do the junior formula. I mean, what it takes now to do F2 and things is colossal amounts of money. So, it's not really a sport that's sort of going to be, to have money, to be able to go karting, to start yourself off. You're catering to a certain type of person, and it has always been the case. I don't know why he brought it up now. I mean, I sort of do, because he's looking at lots of different injustices and he's trying to encourage people from all different backgrounds to get involved, whether it be into the engineering side or anything. So it's going to be at the forefront of his mind. But in actual fact, nothing has changed. And if it hadn't been for McLaren paying his way, as he's made publicly clear, then, or Mercedes at the time as well, McLaren Mercedes, he wouldn't be here. So he benefited from somebody else paying, but somebody else still had to pay.
Interesting. What do you think, Billy? I mean, you're a young man who I know for a fact would love to sit in a Formula One car and race. So what's your opinion on the subject?
I think Lee's sort of hit the nail on the head there. I think it's always been sort of a sport where it's super hard to get into. But I think, to be honest, I do think it's probably getting harder and harder to get through the lower categories, especially because it's just so much money. It's just, you price out like 99% of the population by the time you get into the junior categories. And then at that point, you probably, I mean, the sport's, like Lee said, it's kind of been like that anyway, but your talent pool. I know so many kids that I used to race with in karting and stuff like that who were cracking drivers and deserved a shot at the next level, but they ran out at that point. So you lose people with talent throughout the sort of progression up the ranks as it gets more and more expensive. So it's a shame. That's unfortunately the reality of the sport. It's expensive to race these cars around circuits and go across the world traveling and doing it. That's kind of the situation you've got. You can, as much as you can kind of sit there and feel like you're hard done by, you've kind of, a lot of the times, like Lee said, it's kind of weird as you speak to a lot of people out that are motorsport fans but don't have any idea of the sort of inside what it takes to, like money-wise, to actually get on the door of F1. But I think most young drivers now know that's the case, so they just try and do what they can to market themselves a bit differently, bring the sponsors towards them, and get someone like Lee said to actually pay for you to progress up the ranks, because that's the way that a lot of talented drivers are going to try and look to do it.
So Mark, paint us a picture. What does it take to get into Formula One? Let's answer that question.
Well, it is fascinating because I get asked this question a lot by friends, and the guys are right. Like it's quite a conflicting what happens internally and externally, what people sort of accept of how the journey might look. My journey was very, very different to and I mean even Jensen, Fernando, Robert Kubica, Lewis. There's so many guys who got through on what we say they got through on talent, or they have cash. There's two pockets. There's two buckets, I should say, in terms of how you get through. And I got picked up pretty early. I had very, very little. I had great support, but it wasn't family money. My dad could help me in go-karts and a little bit in Formula Ford. After that, I needed support. What does it need now? I mean, look, the Mazepins, the Latifis and the Strolls, they've moved it, mate, into the, tens and tens and tens of millions of pounds, which is extraordinary. You cannot even, and then you've got at the other end of the grid, guys getting paid that. So how do you work that one out? You've got guys that are bringing that, and Lewis is getting paid that, and they're racing each other. So unprecedented in terms of, I think, the level of wealth that had access to purchase and buy teams and manipulate the seats, which is something which I think Formula One and Liberty, Stefano Domenicali will keep an eye on. I think the Lawrence Strolls, and that it's great for the sport. Clearly, incredibly successful businessmen. There's nothing stopping them, buying a team for their son and they can go racing. But I think that we're at the upper end of that. We can't have any more than what we have now. We have enough on the grid. And there's still it's very hard for the public to understand this, that, it's all the drivers are like that. It's not. There's a lot of guys that have got through with grit, a lot of luck, yes, but with very, very, very little funding, and they got through with no real families, or because their families couldn't support them. So that's important for them to understand. I think Netflix also was quite confusing, because people would watch, the Stroll part of that, and I think Netflix overwhelmingly has been positive for our sport, because people have had a great education process on that, on top of learning some new language from Gunter. But the whole understanding of, well, that's what it's like for all of them. No, it's not like that. That the Stroll scenario is certainly unique. And Lawrence is doing a great job for that team. Lots of, first time we got big employment there. Sorry, good employment, proper money, let's say, I should say, for Formula One to go forward and the rest of it. So there is some positives, but I hope the sport, we're at the top of the ceiling of having guys manipulating the seats with big levels of wealth. 2 or 3 is fine. Any more than that is too many, in my opinion.
You couldn't imagine that in any other sport, can you? I mean, we all know this happens, and that when you said that out loud there, it's happening not just in F1, it happens in the support races. People buy a team and then they don't want someone to sit beside them because they want their son to do well, to win the championship, to get to F1. Can you imagine someone's father saying that, I'm going to go and buy Man United, but I'd love you to give my son a run out?
Yeah. Or I want to play
Just
Roger
doesn't
Federer
happen.
at Wimbledon.
Yeah.
I've got money. I want to try and have the first round against Roger. But the great thing is, Steve, the great thing is they'll never have uber results. That just won't happen. Doesn't matter how much you got, that won't happen, which is still brilliant. There is a filter at some point in terms of consistency and constantly race winning and challenging for championships, fighting for world titles. I don't think those individuals will ever do that.
I'm always kind of intrigued with the dynamic between father, billionaire father and racing son. Now, I'm not saying that Nick Latifi and Lance Stroll aren't cracking racers and they can drive, but there is an element in me that thinks, goodness me, the guy's bought the team. He wants his son to drive. You do know your son could die in that car. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's like you're buying a team. He wants to race. Let him race. He's doing 230 miles an hour on the straight to Baku. It's like, holy shit, it's very dangerous. So I hope your son can drive because bad things can happen out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a journey, mate. They haven't just, to use our point there, I'm just going to go on round one at Wimbledon. Obviously, there has been a 10-year journey. They've been racing karts. They've gone on a long journey. They've done their apprenticeship. So they are still skillful guys. They know what they're doing. But to find that last 3 or 4 tenths or half a second a lap. Mate, who finished 8th in the Olympic final, for the swimming in lane 8? That's what we're talking about. Yeah,
it was Corey O'Neill. I remember. Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about. Still handy.
Yeah.
But and that's again probably not the best example. I'm just sort of back on. Olympics, you do earn your right to be in the Olympics. So the guy in lane 8 is still not. I'm not the equivalent of what's going on here, but I'm saying that the margins to be off the ball and not be competitive, and also they've got a lot of hay in the barn, mate, on experience to the junior categories. So they're not useless.
And that's where you need the FIA to step in. They've got they've been good enough to qualify for a super license, and if someone is dangerous, properly dangerous, they are not going to be allowed to be there. Actually, I probably should know this before I say it out loud. Do we still have a 107% rule on quali? Is that gone?
I think it's been abolished, isn't it?
Okay.
But
Well, it got used in the F2 in Monaco.
Did it?
Someone was over the 107%, but they
so it's still in.
let them
So
in.
it's still in, yeah.
So
But it's
You
hard.
still have to be close enough, you'd have to think.
Yeah, but they're safe enough, mate. They'll circle around, mate, and they'll. It's better for the mechanics. I just think for the teams, for the sport, for the employment, for the teams, like that. What's the other side of the coin? Less teams, poorly funded, average prepared cars, unsafe cars, poor R&D. So that's a positive thing. We just, but their train set goes that little bit further where they want to have their son driving, it's been around a while.
Okay. Fascinating topic. Another Nick here, Nick Topper. On Sunday's pre-race show, Steve asked Max what winning the Monaco Grand Prix would mean to him, and Max answered 25 points. I'm still trying to work out how I feel about this. Was it cool, arrogant, flippant, rude, focused, practical, realistic? What do you lot think?
It was Dutch.
It was Dutch.
You just condemned an entire nation.
It was Dutch.
Well, in that case, I don't know what Nick Topper, is that who it was, made of Max's comments yesterday when he was asked, what do you think of walking a track? And he said, I've not walked a track since 2017. I can't be arsed. I'd rather have a couple more minutes in bed, do a slow outlap, look out of the car and learn what I need to know.
Yeah, he said he'd
Brilliant.
rather eat wasps. No, he didn't. I'm only joking.
But isn't that one of the joys of being brilliant? You can just say those things. Lewis doesn't walk the track either.
No.
But when you're at that level and you're still performing, you can say wherever you like.
But I think he would say that if he was 17th on the grid and 17 years old. I mean, he is consistent. He has been quite consistently. It comes across as an arrogance, but I actually think it's just him. I think.
So what do you think, Billy?
Well, I think they're outside the box as individuals, and what they do is deliver on the track at the end of the weekend. When you look at the podium, half the time at the minute, Lewis and Max are up there. So for all the differences that there are, that them not wanting to do the stuff that every other driver feels the need to do. I mean, like, I'm sure that Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal don't prepare in the same way, but they always get the job done when it comes to actually doing it. So I think it's good that there's differences out there. I mean, in some of the comments that Max comes out with, it does make you, as a driver who's sort of passionate and hungry to want to get out there, you do think like sometimes can be frustrating. I bet people at the back of the grid at the minute are looking at Max and going, you can't even be asked to walk the track, but you're winning these races, and I'm grinding away, and I'm sat at the 19th, 20th getting lapped by you. Like, come on, like, what's that all about? But at the end of the day, if he's doing the job on track, then as much as we can sit here and say it's weird and it's probably not quite right, he doesn't care. He doesn't mind what we say about him because he's still where he wants to be at the end of the weekend.
Yeah. Who are we to question genius? On that note, that brings us to the end of the road for another podcast. Mark, Billy, Lee, you were utterly exquisite. Listeners, you were once again our MVP. It feels only right we reward you for your continued commitment to our F1 blitherings. Actually, I say we reward you. That's incorrect. Ross Walsh of Kilkenny Island, Welshie Official on Instagram. That's Welshie Official. Ross has seen fit to reward all of us with a remix of Conti Marlow. Yeah. Ross heard my fevered ode to Monaco's sexy circuit and wazzed his fat remix into my inbox in the week. And it's quite something. Ross, thank you so much, you absolute legend. All that remains for me to say is, may the downforce be with you, and may all your flags be checkered. Goodbye, and take it away.
Monaco, oh Monaco, I wanna be your hoe. I wanna pop a squat on your sandy bot. I could swing both ways for your matinee. I got casino sweat, shaved into my pubic hair. That's a sin, then why you flashing that hairpin? Oh Monaco, I'm super gay for your Portier. Oh Monaco, I wanna pummel your tunnel. I got to twitch in the main vein of the Novel chicane. I wanna kiss the A-class ass that is your ass.